they
housing
said
discussion.
report housing authority at the top, so, okay. That's what I was wondering, what this.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so they're separate from those payrolls, yes. Mhm.
And then, I believe it'd be appropriate at this time if we entertain a motion to accept the payables and the financials for the month of July. If there's someone that will move on that. McDermott moves that we pay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And I'm sorry how I said to pay, but they're the payables, so they're
Right.
already paid. Okay.
Yes, they're already paid. I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded on the reports that have been presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. And those reports are accepted for the month of July. This time we'll have the Chief Executive Officer's report.
So, the flood, I sent as many updates as possible as the situations were arriving, were happening. Since I've worked here, we've had about maybe 4 floods. I know that some people are referring it as the 100-year flood. It has not been happening every 100 years. It's been happening every about 2 to 3 years, and typically in the month of July and August. Fortunately, we have not had any water damage to our apartments on the east side. We've never have since I've been here. I think the units are built high enough to where it does surround the property, but it doesn't get into the apartments. But at the same time, with this flood, there was some flash flooding that happened, and it impacted the units over in Douglas Village. So that was about 1 in the morning, and I was extremely concerned that we may have had to evacuate those families, but the water rise really quickly and went down quickly, so we didn't have any water damage or any people that needed to be displaced. But all in all, I think it was handled appropriately and handled very well for as much as we could do. There was concerns from residents that were living on the east side, how much water they were surrounded by. It made them nervous and that kind of thing. I did contact several hotels within town to see if, they had rooms available. The responses I got was, we have a room available for one night because we have an event coming in the following day. So a couple residents contacted me, but then decided that it was manageable and they didn't want to go anywhere. So we didn't really have anybody misplaced. So all in all, that went well.
There was a road that I remember seeing a picture of that looked like it was partially washed out. Was that in that?
Oh, that was the picture from Willow. You have basically a large sinkhole
Okay.
that happened due to the flood. So that's actually not our property, that's the city's street. So they are aware of it, and eventually it will be fixed. Right now, there's like construction tape and cones so that people know not to ride the car into the ditch. But it's off to the side, so it's enough room for people not to do that. So that was that. Hosmer, high rise. We're about 50% complete. I was just in a meeting on Tuesday with Peter Levy and Mike Cornell. Mike Cornell is the general contractor with BCM, and Peter Levy, of course, is a developer. We have been meeting quite a bit about the water issues, and we believe that we have found the sources of the water from the outside of the buildings. And there's a solution on the table from the engineer to put these flaps outside that will keep the water from coming in. And so I did encourage them to do so, because when it does rain, we're finding that water is getting into the units. So I think
Flaps where?
it's going to be, if I understood what the engineer was saying to me, it's going to kind of be on the outside of the building on various different floors, because all of the apartments are not having the issue. You just have certain apartments and certain angles that are having the issues. And so they're going to put some flaps on the outside.
Do you have a backup plan for that? Because if the flaps don't work, are you guys gonna be able to lay down tarp? That way that'll stop all the flooding.
Well, I don't know that, it won't work, but if it doesn't work, we are willing to go back to the table as many times as we need to. But, I believe that what they propose should work based on their reports that they're giving out. So if it doesn't, then we'll go back to the drawing board.
What did you say too? It's not a roofing issue? They've already done
It is not a roofing issue.
Retarring, we're not.
It's not a roofing issue.
So there's this driven rain into,
It's the side of the building.
Right, it's the side of the building. So what you have, some of the reason that it's happening is because the building is older and some of the concrete has like sunk in. And so they're gonna have to remove that concrete and put more concrete up, but at the same time put the flaps down. If I understood that correctly, but that's basically what I understood on. But I'm all for whatever solution they have because it does happen quite a bit when it rains. And unfortunately, we've seen a shift in it since construction has started. Like we had it prior to construction, but we've seen more once construction has started. And so the engineer is doing an extensive check on all the floors in the apartments to see what is causing the issue from various different places. Because it's weird in a sense, because there's a unit that we never had that issue in, and now all of a sudden we're having that issue there. And so they are working diligently on that. But I believe that we've gotten one solution, so we're gonna go for it. The Brewster High Rise, we've met with residents and relocated we relocated them to the higher floors, and the construction has started. I'm really excited about the construction starting to happen. Again, we're 50% done on the Hosmer, and the goal is to be done with both projects by the end of the year.
this year?
Of this year.
Brewster's next.
Yeah, well, Hosmer's December, Brewster's May, yeah. So we're hopeful that we'll be done with those, but I met with the construction crew yesterday, and they're starting to do some of the work, so it's pretty good. Local contractor as well. Westview, our favorite conversation right now. Many of you, all of you should have received the report from Fairgram. A lot of it was engineer jargon, and so some of it was difficult to process. So I did meet with both the engineer and the developer, and basically the foundations that are having the issues, it appears to be an underground issue. So it appears that the concrete is gonna have to be taken out and replaced. I had a conversation this morning with the developer in HUD to look at this is gonna be extremely expensive to repair. And so what would be our options to take on such a project? Or is it what's your direction in terms of whether we should continue forward or not? So we had an in-depth conversation about some grants that may be available that can assist with the cost. And one of those grants is under emergency housing issues. And so I met with an engineer from HUD maybe about 4 years ago about the Westview property, because some of them have not been online in about 20 or 30 years. So we were talking in terms of what do you do with those units. And so he is suggesting that we look into potentially applying for the grant for emergency assistance with that issue. I have never applied for that type of grant, so I'm doing a lot of reading now and working with people that have done it. in the past, so, but it may be one option to help us with the cost, depending on what we decide to do. But the report is a preliminary report. There's gonna be some other reports that come out from Fair and Graham that gives us the cost of what it would take to remove the concrete, because it looks like they're gonna have to break the concrete up and remove it by hand, in a conversation that I had with them, so.
And then further into that, they're gonna have to dig out the fill by hand, because the building exists. And they're gonna have to fill, all that fill out, and then they're gonna have to replace the fill with all of that by hand. It'll be extraordinarily expensive.
So, that is the preliminary report that we have. From a cost perspective, they're gonna respond to us with what that would cost. So we'll be having a lot more conversations about this and how we wanna proceed, but I thought it was important that we talk about this now because it's been a topic of discussion for quite some time. Any questions for me on that?
Yeah. Is there any effort made on the part of the Housing Commission or the board or anybody else that you know of into seriously looking for alternative sites for Westview?
Well, it is it's a discussion.
I mean, you and I have had those discussions, we've had them here in the board, but is there anybody looking seriously into that, or is it just the discussion we've had here?
Well, HUD and myself and the developer has had that discussion as well. The difficulty in finding another site would be a site large enough to have a one-for-one replacement on it. The other caveat to the discussion is that we do have Parkside that's located in the floodplain. And in our heads, that's more of a natural disaster kind of area that, you know, at some point, we're gonna need to have a discussion as a board. What do we do with that site? We've had the discussion maybe 2 years ago, but we don't know of different land that's available at this point to move something like that forward. But again, we, you know, we need to know that could be much more difficult and much more controversial than what we're doing with the housing resolution. So to answer your question in short, yes, other people have looked. There hasn't been any real prospects from that looking, but that was a discussion that I had with HUD this morning.
And one final question, is it possible, legal within HUD and practical and desirable, to consider replacing some of the units in Westview with high-rise type units instead? We might need fewer, less land to do that.
Is it possible? Yes. Is it,
How does it work with units? Because they're 2, 3, 4, and 5 bedrooms.
right, but like, let's take what they did in Rockford with, what's Fairgrounds. They built a new property, it's called the Grove now. It was a portion of Fairgrounds that they took and they built, the Grove with. Very nice units and that kind of thing, and it's like a subdivision. It's kind of like Westview, but it's built more modern and people are not stacked on top of each other. So that is an option. The difficulty with Westview is that it's such a large site, right? And so maybe there's parts of land in the community that would hold 40 units, right? HUD would look at that as, yeah, that would probably be a good thing to do, but you also have to keep in mind that it may be more expensive to manage because then you run into the scattered site kind of thing. But it could be doable, yes.
Oh, I was thinking more of could you take some of the stable land in Westview tear down those buildings and build some high rises to replace not only those buildings, but the ones that are sinking.
High rises, it'll be a different family composition. And so, and the way I understand HUD's guidelines is whatever you tear down, you have to replace. And so it would be difficult to put a 4-bedroom in a high rise. So the difficulty is it's a 1-for-1 replacement. That's the way I understand the regulation. But if the market study shows that you don't need as many 4-bedrooms, but you need more 2-bedrooms or you need more 1-bedrooms, then I think that would support the change. Any other questions about that?
And I would just say, and I don't need an answer, Dave, but when you're talking to the engineers, I'm just thinking to what Roger was saying, cost efficiency wise, wouldn't it be less expensive to basically knock a building down, scrape the foundation, repack it, and then start from scratch versus all this manual wheelbarrow, new packing of substrate?
So we agree, we all agree with that, but here's the difficulty in that. The only funding mechanism that's on the market, that's in HUD in the country right now is RAD. So the numbers have to work in order to redevelop a site, because you're gonna either have to go for 4% tax credits or you're gonna have to go for 9. 4% are easier to get, 9% is more of a competitive process. So could we make it work with a 4% tax credit deal? And that is where the developers is saying, I don't believe that we could, if we're gonna go with a full take them down. So we're in that discussion for sure, because it may be that there's a multi-phase to this whole thing. And so some may get remodeled, some may get torn down, and we figure out how to put them together and make them work. So
I was just thinking of the Ring report, you know, you got a crooked substrate with now a crooked building on it. We're gonna take the foundation and substrate, make it straight. Well, now, how are we gonna straighten this building? It just seemed like, yikes, how's it gonna happen? So,
And I can't imagine how much work it would be to dig out not only the floor, but all the substrate down to where it needs to be, maybe 20 feet down. Pardon me, that'd be an awful lot of work to do with a wheelbarrow.
absolutely, absolutely. So what I think will happen is the reports will show that this will be way too expensive for us to do, right? And so what option do we have if that's not the option? Can we tear it down? What's the cost of that? How do we make sure that we are not misplacing people and that kind of thing? So there's a lot to be discussed. So we'll be having this discussion for quite some time.
I think that we need to keep this as a very active talking point in every meeting, and because otherwise it's gonna get away from us, and then we're gonna be in deep doo.
Yeah, you know, the conversation with HUD today was about what are the other issues that are happening in the property because of this. So because of the foundations in the problem, what are the other things that are happening? You had, we get a lot of insects and things like that coming in because the ground has sunk. We've also had some issues with brown water, where they have to let the water run for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So in that conversation with HUD, there's some more work I have to do on that in terms of inspecting all of those units and reporting back what else is happening in the units because of this. Because the more information we have that we can make this a health and safety issue, the more likely we'll get something done faster than later. Last thing is, you guys can shoot me an email on this. I'm wondering what days or times of preference that you guys have in terms of training, so I can make sure that it coincides, you know, we pick a time and date where it kind of works for everyone. So you can shoot me an email on your time.
You didn't do the legal expenses. Would it be possible to have have a special meeting? Do you have to wait for